Alright, this is part 2 of my top 50 albums of 2017. This is albums 25 to the big moment you've all been waiting for. My number 1 album of the year. So let's go. Number 25, Iglooghost, Neo Wax Bloom. Definitely one of the best electronic debuts that I've heard this year. Just a very colorful, whimsical, like heartwarming sort of electronic world that I would absolutely love to live in. I mean, heck, this is even the kind of album children could jam to, because it's just that insane and colorful and just all around wonderful record. Number 24, Brick Body Kids, Open Mike Eagle, Brick Body Kids Still Daydream, which sees the California rapper really upping his game as a lyric writer. It's sort of about this kid who, is sort of struggling to kind of find his place in society as friends are moving away, and how institutions and his town are disappearing as well. Just a fantastic, very well written record. But not only is the writing great, but the production is really good, as well as the hooks are incredibly catchy. Some awesome features on here from Shamus and Hoslow on the songs Hymnal and 95 Radios, the latter being the lead single released for this album. Number 23, Margo Price, All American Made. Definitely one of the best country records of the year. I've been hearing good things about Margo Price a little bit in 2016, but this is my first time finally listening to her, and I love her voice, and also the very organic country production that doesn't have any Pro Tools or digital country endorsements. Endorsements is definitely very well done as well, and the lyrical content, it's good to see a woman in country music really standing up for herself, pretty much, even as women over the years have kind of felt like they didn't really have a place to belong necessarily. This is kind of this could be a really inspirational record for them. Number 22, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, Flying Microtonal Banana. This band has put out over 5 albums this year. 5 albums. Wow. I mean, heck, after I'd finished part 1 of this video, I came to see that King Gizzard actually released their 5th album this year just recently, called Gumboot Soup. Before that was this one, Murder of the Universe, Sketches of Brunswick East, and Polygon Wonderland. But in my opinion, Flying Microtonal Banana is the best out of all of that, because this is definitely a very ambitious record for the band, as they make usage of microtonal tuning and microtonal instruments and whatnot for the first time, in some very kind of odd and very uniquely structured songs. Songs that have some very cool, amazing melodies on here, and some great writing, and some very energetic performances, just as you would expect from King Gizzard. Number 21, Feist, Pleasure. Definitely very surprised how much I loved this album. Definitely one of the best singer-songwriter albums of the year over here. This is an album that's very intimate, stark and unadorned, but at the same time definitely very lushly produced, which I really appreciate that. and also some great songwriting. Feist's vocal performances on the album are gorgeous. Both are gorgeous. And yeah, the record definitely is a very strong album in this kind of strong, prolific streak of indie folk singer-songwriter records that are coming out right now. So, whether you're familiar with Feist or not, you don't necessarily have to go and scope out her older stuff to really appreciate what she does, like right after listening to this album. Number 20, Benjamin Booker, Witness. And, of course, like I said, with that list of artists that you should definitely check out in 2017, I'm very sure Benjamin Booker would probably make it onto the list, too. He did sort of gain some success, like a few years back, but this is my first time listening to him, but I am definitely very impressed with what he does. Like, it's kind of political lyrically, with the themes of racism and whatnot that it addresses, that's displayed through a very just powerful voice, which I do really like, and some great production on this album too. It's kind of like fuzzy garage rock that still has plenty of creativity and nuance to the production to keep things fresh, and it does nicely incorporate the elements of blues and soul here. Number 19, Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings, Soul of a Woman. It is definitely sad that we lost Sharon Jones, definitely who was definitely a great R&B singer, pretty much the leading voice on the Daptone Records soul revival that's been around since the early 2000s. But we can be thankful that she left behind by far some of her greatest performances yet with this album, and the Dap-Kings production on this album is definitely some of their best on a Sharon Jones and the Dap-Kings record, without any duds or anything like that. Just coming through with some fantastic grooves and some very lush orchestral arrangements, which definitely makes this it may be her last time making it onto year-end lists, or the last time we're ever going to hear music from her, but it certainly is some of the best we'll hear from her. Number 18, Spoon, Hot Thoughts. One of indie rock's most consistent and acclaimed bands yet, comes through with, by far, their most ambitious record yet, as they do, tackle dance and disco music, sort of paying tribute to Bowie and whatnot, more than ever, but they do a really good job of incorporating these, kind of odd electronic sounds into a very groovy, sexy, and very smart and catchy new record over here. And also definitely some good little surprises in there, like the saxophone-drenched Us. So because of all that, I'm definitely very excited and curious to see what this band does from here on out. Number 17, Laura Marling, Semper Femina. Probably my singer-songwriter album of the year over here. I mean, another record that does sort of address feminism, but not really in an overtly political way, but more in a kind of deeply personal sort of way. I mean, the vignettes that she creates on this album are very vivid and kind of blunt, but at the same time, they're definitely very poetic and they definitely feel like these really beautiful poems that she sort of recites throughout this record. And the production, even though it is pretty skeletal and stripped back, it still definitely is very well done. I mean, Blake Mills handled the production on this record, and he's been doing a lot of great work lately, so definitely good to see him doing well with Laura Marling. Number 16, Algiers, The Underside of Power. But on definitely the much more political side, we have this record that is definitely pretty much the album we all needed in kind of these turbulent times in 2017. Very unique mix of industrial, post-punk, and gospel. Definitely some really good soulful vocal performances from Franklin Fisher. And this album, it definitely is kind of aggressive and in your face and whatnot, and chaotic, but it's also definitely balances it out with some really beautiful like ballads as well. And wow, creating this definitely a very well balanced and balanced as well as very well produced and written record. Number 15, The XX, I See You. Definitely a fantastic record. I mean, I have probably one of the most positive reviews of this album out there. But you know, I definitely do really like this album for its very smart, optimistic, though deeply personal and bleak songwriting. Jamie XX comes through with some very sensual, engaging beats on here, which I definitely do really like a lot. And there's plenty of creativity in there, including the Hall & Oates sample on Hold, which just sounds so catchy. And of course, Oliver and Romy's voices have great chemistry with each other with this album. It's just a really strong XX record. Number 14, Mount Eerie, A Crow Looked at Me. By far one of the most agonizing, like depressing indie folk records that I've heard this year. I mean, this is like a bit of a bleak concept album because it is dealing with something pretty traumatic in Phil Elverum's life, which is the death of his wife, Genevieve, who apparently was a musician and cartoonist. So it's certainly not necessarily a record you want to listen to when you want to party and have a good time. This is a record that is best listened to in moments of solitude, but also at the same time definitely a very kind of cathartic record as well. Like if you've lost someone who is very close to you in your life, this is definitely a record that's kind of some nice kind of soothing relief for that as well. Number 13, OC's Orc. Let me say this, no record kicked my ass as hard as this album did. OC's come through with probably their best collection of songs to date, with some of their best production and writing, instrumentation, some wonderful energy here on this record, some very kind of nutty, cheeky vocal performances from John Dwyer, which I do really like. Pretty much, really good and really well done on all fronts, pretty much. I know it is kind of a bold statement for me to say all this, considering the only other stuff I've heard from them is mostly is their last couple of records, which they dropped back to back in 2016. But this album once again really does show how OCs are really on quite a prolific streak right now. Are on quite a really good, consistent streak right now. That's what I meant. Even though they are pretty prolific, but you get the idea. Number 12, Kelela, Take Me Apart. And also in my list of artists that you should check out in 2017, Kelela would certainly go there as well, or Kelela, however you say it. But you know, just some very powerful, very kind of very kind of purposeful, confident vocal performances on here that are absolutely gorgeous and definitely have plenty of power to them. The glitchy R&B production is definitely very well done, and I applaud all the producers who handled production on this record for not using trap music or any of that stuff as a crutch or anything like that. And really dishing out some kind of fresher ideas, which definitely is like much appreciated from someone like me. And the lyrics, you know, they do address some pretty personal topics like love, sex, and like the trouble of relationships and whatnot, but really addressing it in a very kind of smart, purposeful way, which which makes this album definitely very compelling to listen to. Number 11 is Father John Misty, pure comedy. I mean, what can I say other than Josh Tillman continues to get better and better as a songwriter, as is presented here on this album. It may not have the same wry humor that his last couple of records had. This is something a little more bleak, but you know, it's definitely a record that for anyone sort of going through these just really tough times in society, this is definitely a record that I think will kind of be like a nice bit of breath of fresh air to hear someone else sort of addressing sort of their sadness over all of this stuff going on. Sort of addressing sort of the human condition being a little dehumanized somewhat. And also he comes through with some of his most lavish arrangements yet, and it's definitely a record that I highly recommend listening to as a whole, like uninterrupted, on vinyl, like what I do when I listen to this record. Alright, this is the big moment you've all been waiting for. My top 10 albums of 2017. Starting with number 10, Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit, the Nashville Sound. Just like in 2015, Jason Isbell comes through in 2017 with the best Americana record of the year. I mean, he really matures as a songwriter right here. And definitely comes through with by far his most kind of political set of songs yet. While, yes, also addressing some of his other topics that he's been long obsessed with, like depression and stuff like that, on songs like If We Were Vampires, one of my favorite tracks here on the record. But underneath all that darkness, I like how there's a good sense of hope to this record too. I mean, just take a look at songs like Hope the High Road or Something to Love. He definitely comes through with an album that has kind of a good sense of optimism to it without anything being too cheesy or anything like that. And also just some great production on here. Dave Cobb does some expert mixing on here. It may not be anything that's like radically new or anything like that, but it's just another really strong Jason Isbell record. Number 9, Fleet Foxes, Crack Up. This album was definitely one of my most highly anticipated LPs of the year, and I'm so glad that it really lived up to my excitement for it, because just when you think the band has no more tricks up their sleeve, they come out with this, which really does step up their ambitious chops in terms of the instrumentation, as well as love the little field recordings they incorporate in there with like sloshing water or a bird chirping or something like that. Something like that. And also I like how this album kind of shifts in and out with different emotions. And it's a record that I highly recommend you listen to, like, as a whole, uninterrupted, on vinyl, once again. Like I said, with the Father John Misty record. Because it's definitely, it tells, like, this little story, pretty much, and it definitely is a good little, kind of, step forward for the band, instead of just them just trying to fill in gaps or try to rehash what they've done before. Number 8, Bjork, Utopia. You know, I wouldn't say this, you know, not really the most well-versed in Bjork just yet, but I definitely really like what I've heard on this latest record, Utopia. It's definitely some very, like, one thing I noticed right away is just how unique and how, like, distinctive Bjork's voice is. The voices, man, it sort of pulls you in pretty much. And also, really beautiful production on here. It's definitely got sort of an electronic edge to it, but also with very beautiful orchestral arrangements, like the flute, like a flute section, as well as harp and whatnot. And I've heard that this album is definitely kind of like a nice bit of a, like a nice sort of optimistic sort of relief after the kind of tough subjects that she addressed on her previous record, Vulnicura. Number 7, Ryan Adams, Prisoner, the breakup album that all breakup records strive to become. It's definitely a very kind of bleak, heartbreaking record, but still at the same time, definitely very intelligent with how it addresses the split here, and also definitely a record that I think will be nice, soothing balm for those down and out times, for those of you other people who are currently going through a breakup right now. And also, the production is a very triumphant tribute to the 80s post-punk sound that he's, like, definitely very obsessed with. Number 6 is The War on Drugs, A Deeper Understanding. Another record that I was really excited for, and I'm definitely very happy that my hype paid off big time. As Adam Granduciel definitely continues to mature and progress as a lyric writer. He definitely does sound more confident than ever. And the production on this thing, it's like what you would usually expect from the band, but with definitely a little more kick to it. Definitely a little more kick to it. And this album, like, I can tell from listening to this record that they must have gained a deeper understanding of all the things they can do so well, because me and a lot of other critics, like, love it so much. Number 5, Julien Baker, Turn Out the Lights. Lights. Which, man, my first time listening to Julien Baker was definitely a pretty special experience, for sure. For sure. Love her ability to take just a simple electric guitar and really create just some very, like, powerful, brooding melodies with it. Great songwriting on here, too. And her vocal performances. I love her ability to kind of, pull you in with just an intimate little whisper, but then eventually just explode once it gets to the end. So it's definitely a very cathartic record, though not really with too many instruments in it. Number 4, brand new science fiction, which one of the most beloved emo bands from the 2000s, comes out with a very solid farewell record, which upon hearing this record, even though I haven't heard too many brand new songs before, upon hearing this album, I can see how they can write some songs that are definitely just really heart-rending and powerful, full as any good emo band would be. And also like great production on here that while it is rooted in like classic punk and emo, it still definitely has plenty of other nuances to keep it fresh. Number 3, Perfume Genius, No Shape. Which Mike Hadreas definitely made the best art pop album that I've heard this year. And hopefully when you hear it, you will feel the same way. I mean, some great, very lavish production from Blake Mills here. And this is a very cathartic record. I mean, the lyrics have just so many inspirational messages to them, which I absolutely love. Some great vocal presence here, and yeah, it's definitely a record that right off the bat, from hearing the first track for the first time, I was like, this is gonna be an amazing album. Number 2, Kendrick Lamar, Damn. This one is probably the most obvious here on this list. I mean, a lot of people have this album as like their number 1 or number 2 on their list, but, you know, for good reason, though, because Kendrick Lamar definitely continues to mature with his lyrics. He really gets personal with the listener here on this record, which I love. And this album and the production, while it's not the same ambitious production of To Pimp a Butterfly, it's more kind of traditional hip-hop sort of beats, but it shows that Kendrick Lamar could still really leave a pretty big impression on the listener, even when just spitting verses over trappy hip-hop beats. Alright, now it's time for the big moment, my number 1 album of the year. And if you've seen my review for this record, you know you saw it coming. Number 1, The National, Sleep Well Beast. A record that I was definitely highly excited for this year. And let me say, my hype paid off in a pretty damn big way. Because this album is The National's most ambitiously produced, most maturely written. It's definitely by far their second best record next to Boxer, in my opinion. I mean, just great songwriting, the production is fantastic, very grand, and definitely some of the most lavish and musically engaging that I've heard from this group. Matt Berninger, even though still sounding bleak as ever vocally, just sounds more confident than ever. The songs are very catchy. I mean, all the songs here are fantastic. There are no clunkers here. And upon hearing this record, I am definitely very hopeful about the band's future. Because 4 years after their previous record, they, out of the blue, came out with, by far, definitely one of their greatest records yet. And so it's definitely good to see the band progressing once again, and it was definitely all enough good things to say about it to lead up to me saying this is my number 1 of the year. So that's my top 50 albums of 2017, and I will see you in the new year, 2018, with another review in a couple of weekends. See ya! Happy New Year!